Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Hey, thanks for joining us once again here at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. Now, this week I want to talk about something I talk about a lot on our website. I write about it a lot, and I've talked about it in past podcasts. Although, since we're doing a new series of videos here as a broadcast, I wanted to kind of cover some of those issues that maybe if you're just joining us for the first time, you found us on YouTube, you found us on TV, then maybe this is a good chance to cover some ground that we've covered both on the website and in podcasts over the year, but maybe we haven't talked about it recently or ever at all here on this broadcast. So what I want to talk about is something that I think most of us know innately, intuitively. We have an experience, an anecdotal experience if we're leaders in the church or if we're just parents who have young kids or students in the church in their high school, junior high, college years. We're experiencing something that if I was in any church setting and I asked a crowd of Christians if they know of any young Christians in their college years who walked away from their church and maybe have still not returned to church, I think most of us would see hands go up in every church across America. We know anecdotally at least, and you might argue, well, it's always been this way. Young people always take a season in which they explore and they kind of leave the church for a season. They explore some other ideas. They go to college. They're maybe tempted by other, and they come back eventually. And or if you raise the kids in the church and you do a good job, eventually they're going to return to the church. Well, I think that's true. It's to some degree, but what we really are seeing over the last 10 years, I think, is a dramatic and very well documented departure of young people from Christianity. Now look, I say this, and I know that there are some places you can go online, like Gospel Coalition and other places where pastors have kind of stepped up and said, really, we're making too big a deal out of this alleged crisis. It's not really a crisis at all. As a matter of fact, young people maybe aren't even leaving at a rate any higher than ever before, and they'll draw out some metric they can use in order to make their case. But I will tell you that I don't think that's probably accurate, given the broad-ranging statistics that have been appearing for the last 10 years or so related to the departure of young people from the church in their college years. I think we have to be realistic about this and honest about it. We are facing a crisis, and I think one of the most popular articles on our website right now, in terms of its Google hits, in terms of the number of people who visit the site, who find us for the first time by doing a Google search, ends up being the article we did on Are Young People Really Leaving the Church? As a matter of fact, it's just entitled that, Are Young People Really Leaving Christianity? And of course, there's a distinction between leaving Christianity and leaving the church. And so a lot of folks may not claim any religious affiliation anymore. They may not be part of a mainline denomination or a part of a traditional church setting, but they may still hold to their Christian beliefs. So we need to be clear about that distinction for sure. But the statistics that are being developed, and I actually collected these, and I have researched some pretty significant. I think I've done some work in this area because I knew as a pastor I had an anecdotal experience myself in which I saw that my young students were leaving sometimes in their college years. In the first year as a youth pastor, we had a terrible record with the number of students who left us. So I think it's something I wanted to address. And as I did the research, I realized it was a nationwide trend. At the time, I hadn't really looked at it all that much. This is maybe, 7 or 8 years ago. So maybe even more. So I went ahead and I've assembled for you on our website. Remember, all the articles that you'll find at coldcasechristianity.com are downloadable as PDF files. Hit the little link, and you'll see it creates a PDF file that you can either save or print. So the idea here is I wanted to give you some resources, and I've given you one resource called Are Young People Leaving Christianity that really links for you all the research that I've found in this area. It's all hyperlinked, and I've given you a summary of the findings of each study. And I don't care who it is you're looking at for this. I don't care. I've given you a number of books and of surveys that kind of look at both things. Books like Almost Christian, books like A Teen Guide to Global Action, politics and professional advancement in college faculty in terms of some of the research studies that have been done. I've also included those. So I've given you books that have been written by authors on this topic, and I've also given you the links to the studies that are online still, so you can actually see, well, how are they measuring this, and what are the, so you can get all of that at an article called "Are Young People Leaving Christianity?" And as I'm looking at it here in my notes, if you print it, it's 6 pages of studies and books related to this issue, and I broke it down into major categories. So you'll find it in terms of research related to the spiritual life of teenagers. That's, I think, actually something you really need to look at first. What might be underlying the problem to begin with, and it does come down to, I think, the spiritual life of teenagers. Research related to the attitude of college professors, and we'll get to why that's important in a minute. Research related to the decreasing Christian population in general. That's one of the things I want to talk about before I even get into some strategy we might be able to employ for how to address this issue. And what I really want, this whole topic this week is, number one, are young people leaving the church? And number two, what can we do about it? What is there anything we can do about it? And I think this is what I want this whole topic to be about this week. And I'm going to try to give you resources at the end of this that will help you to sort through this for yourself. And one of these resources will be this PDF file that kind of assembles all the research. And so for those of you who think, well, maybe it's not as bad as Jim's making it out to be, is this kind of these guys who are trying to cry fire in a crowded theater because they really have some agenda? Well, I'm going to tell you that I think we'd have to agree on a couple of things. We'd have to agree that Christianity in general is declining in our country. The number of people who would self-identify themselves as theists and as Christian theists is decreasing over the years. And that's been happening for a number of years. If you look at Pew studies, any other study that's on any metric you want, the number of people who self-identify as Christians today is lower than it was 50 years ago. Well, what group? Is it a matter of just immigration? Or is it a matter of a particular group in the church that seems to be shrinking? And that's where all the other studies will show you that, yeah, it is a group in the church that's shrinking. It's young people. The young people are no longer in the same numbers that we found them in 50 years ago. The rate of attrition when it comes to young people is staggering. We would agree, though, that I think that look, we have a decreased, we're almost in what we would title a post-Christian culture here in America. So we do see the decline of the influence of Christianity in the culture. And then we also see the death of denominations in our culture, the shrinking number of attendance in church. You have mega churches, non-denominational churches are one thing, but denominational churches are certainly shrinking. So all of these things, I think, incline me to believe that something's going on. Well, where's the action? Where is it happening? I think it's happening really at the level of young people, and probably as early as junior high, and certainly by the time they're in high school. They are struggling with this. And so as I've given you these resources also related to the shrinking of Christianity in the general population, but also then specifically I've given you a number of books and surveys that really address the issue of young people leaving the church. And let me just tell you, whether it's the Southern Baptist Convention data that I gathered from 2001, or it's the Gallup poll studies that start in 2002, or it's the Southern Baptist Convention's Family Life Council, which is a survey done in 2002, or the book Soul Searching by Christian Smith and Melinda Denton. We talked a lot about that over the years here since he wrote that book. If it's the Barna studies through the 2000s, if it's books like Josh McDowell's The Last Christian Generation, or the Assemblies of God studies that began in 2007, or Lifeway Research studies from 2007, the book Unchristian that Barna released in 2007. Several other books I've also included that are less known books, like Rethink, Is Student Ministry Working, from 2007. Then Christian Smith also wrote Souls in Transition. Look, all of these, I'm not even going to read through all of them for you. But as I look at each way this has been studied, it's pretty clear something is going on here, folks. And I think we've got to figure out how we're going to respond to it. Now, after the break, I want to talk to you about what I think is the simple math on this problem to begin with. Why are young people leaving the church to begin with? And, by the way, Lifeway says only about the numbers, just so you get an idea of how bad they are. These surveys will put the numbers anywhere between 55 and 80% of those Christians who might have identified themselves as Christians, young Christians in high school, by the time they're out of college, the college years at least, they're no longer Christians. And Lifeway says in their study, that's a study from 2007, that only about a third of those will ever return to the church. Now, I know there are other opposing studies on this, but I think as we see the general trend in our culture away from Christianity, it's going to be hard to deny that we are shrinking as a group. So the question becomes, what demographic in the church is actually shrinking the most and the fastest? And I think you have to agree that's going to be young people. And then what can we do about it? We'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll try to address both of those issues.
Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily case note email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian case maker.
Okay, so what is really behind this exodus of whatever percentage you may agree or not agree? If we said it was, hey, only 30% shrinking, is that even acceptable? I don't think 30% would be acceptable. 50% certainly wouldn't be. And by the time you get into the 60s, where most of these surveys place it somewhere in the 60s or 70 percentiles, this is simply unacceptable. And what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? Well, I think there are a couple of things. Let me first of all just kind of illustrate what I think is the problem in terms of the mathematics here. And my partner Brett Kunkel and I, who work a lot with students, talk about this all the time. He has a kind of a two-part equation that he writes out, and I write it out in 3 parts. And I think that this is really something we need to address because it'll help us give a strategy for addressing the problem. Here's what I see. I think that our young students, for the most part, are incredibly unprepared to enter college and the challenges they're going to face. Now, I say that not just to kind of anecdotally. I mean, I certainly it's been my personal experience, but I think as you survey this across, starting with with Christian Smith's book, if you start with that book, you'll see that young Christians are incredibly inarticulate about what they believe. But it's not just young Christians. My gosh, as I go around the country and talk to adult Christians in different church settings, I see the same thing all the time with adults as well. That adults are simply not prepared to answer the toughest questions. Why are you a Christian? We've talked about it before on this show. When you ask that question, you'd be amazed at the kind of responses you get. None of the responses seem to be based in an evidential kind of epistemology where we said, well, I believe, and I'm a Christian because I believe Christianity is true, and here are the reasons why I believe it's true. Typically, what you're going to get are answers that you would not suffice for young people. Let's face it, even if you and I as adults were to say something like that, we're not in the colleges. We're not in the place where we're being challenged. So while it might work for us for the years that we're going to go along in our merry lives and be at work, it's not working for young people. And we hear this all the time from parents who will come to me after a talk and say, look, I got to tell you, my 25-year-old is no longer a Christian. Can I give him your book? And I typically will say, well, I'm glad you want the book, but to be honest, you need to read the book. You need to have read the book. You need to know the information that's in the books, because the first person that young person is going to ask when they have a question is not going to be me. They don't know me. They're going to be asking you. And you can give them my book. It's going to sit on their shelf. We as parents need to understand the truth and be able to articulate it rather than pass it off to an author who your kids don't even know. And that's really the responsibility we have as parents. But the first part of the equation is simply that young Christians are not prepared. They're poorly equipped, poorly trained. And this is true of most Christian youth groups around the country. No, I'm not going to isolate any one. This is the way it is. The second part of the equation, though, is that they're going to face challenges in the college years, in university settings. So you've got poorly equipped, prepared young Christians, plus aggressive, usually antagonistic in some way toward the Christian worldview. Not all of them are the same. Not all of them are kind of like, God's Not Dead, the movie where you've got this hostile professor. But there's a good chance your students in the college years are going to face someone like that. So that's the second part of the equation. And by the way, what do I really think are the challenges that are facing young Christians right now? I think they're twofold. I think they really are about, is theism true? And is Christianity true? Is it reliable? That's the first thing. And number two, we've got some cultural hot topic issues that I think are dividing young Christians from their peers and from the stands that are being taken. So, for example, homosexuality and same-sex marriage and abortion and all these hot topic issues, it seems that young Christians feel like they're always on the wrong side of those issues relative to the culture in which they find themselves. Now, are they prepared to hold on to what they believe? Are they prepared to defend what they believe? Do they even know why what they believe is true? If they don't, they're going to be shaken in those years because they're going to encounter, if nothing else, people who hold to different cultural values than they do. And then, of course, the issue is going to become these people also hold to different truth claims that they're going to say are more evidential than theirs. In other words, they're going to come to our young people and they're going to say, hey, what you believe about this cultural issue is crazy. And the reason why it's crazy is because you ground your beliefs in a nonsensical worldview that makes no sense either. Let me strip you of that. Let me help you to see the logic in the secularist worldview, and then you'll see why we believe what we believe about these other hot topic issues. So we're going to have to do some work, I think, to get young people ramped up so they're able to articulate what they believe and why they believe it. So here's the equation so far. Young, underprepared, ill-equipped young Christians plus a hostile, aggressive, usually antagonistic environment at the university setting. But there's a third dimension here that we often ignore that I think is equally as powerful. And that is, the third dimension is that we are all innately fallen human beings, and young people are no exception. And we've got these desires, these things we want to chase, girlfriends, boyfriends, parties, all the things that happen in college. And we all are inclined to chase our passions and chase our desires. And boy, if you can give me a worldview that can explain how I got here, and it can answer all the big questions that a worldview has to answer, and it will also allow me to sleep with my girlfriend and not feel bad about it, well, see ya, Christianity. I'm more than happy to chase that worldview and accept that worldview because it gives me permission to follow my fallen desires and my fallen passions. So what I'm trying to say here is I think our young people are almost always kind of perched on the edge, leaning toward wanting to leave because they really want to do these things that they feel constrained to do in the Christian worldview. And then they encounter an environment that's hostile to what they believe, and they're not prepared to defend what they believe anyway. So it's not all that hard to step away. That's the equation. That's the mathematics that I think is just killer for us as a church, and we've got to be able to address it. And I think a lot of this is going to come down to training. How well are we ready? How eager are we, I should say, to do this kind of training with our young people? And how well equipped are we to do it ourselves? We'll take a quick break. We'll come back afterwards, and I'll give you a simple, brief strategy. We talked about it longer. Maybe we'll do a whole broadcast on my train paradigm that I always talk about, how we need to train rather than teach. But we'll come back to that maybe in a future episode. But I want to give you, if you're a parent, if you're somebody who's interested in the crisis that we're facing, and you're trying to figure out what can I do about it, how can I contribute, I want to give you a simple strategy right after the break.
Be sure to download the free Cold Case Christianity app from the iTunes Store and the Android Marketplace. The Cold Case Christianity app puts all the resources from coldcasechristianity.com in the palm of your hand. You can read the daily blog, listen to podcasts, and watch videos from within the application. And Jim uses the app to send direct messages to fans of Cold Case Christianity. The app will also link you to all Cold Case Christianity social media and provide you with a direct connection to J. Warner Wallace. Download the app today and become a better Christian casemaker. Need a speaker for your next conference, retreat, training seminar, or church service? Jim travels around the country, making the case for the existence of God, the deity of Jesus, and the reliability of the Bible. He'd love to partner with you to create a powerful, transformational training experience. Just visit the Cold Case Christianity website and click the Book Me tab. You'll find everything you need to know there, including a list of Jim's speaking topics, promotional materials, Jim's speaking calendar, and a link to connect with our team so we can book your event.
Okay, now we've talked a little bit about, I think, the crisis that we're facing, and I think we can understand why this is so, given what young people are going to face in their college years. But I want to kind of give you a strategy, or at least a kind of a thumbnail sketch of what you might be able to do as a parent right now. Now, look, I've talked a lot in the past, and I've got resources online at Cold Case Christianity that you can look at and download on a train paradigm that I talk about. That the reason why it's so important to stop teaching young people, I say it all the time, stop teaching them. It's doing us no good at all. We've got to instead train. And the difference between teaching and training is really quite simple. The difference is just this. Teaching is about imparting information. Very important. to do. Training, though, is about preparing for a battle, preparing for an encounter, preparing for a task, preparing for a job, a mission. That's what you do when you train. And training is really important because if boxers don't train, they get fat, right? And if you don't have a fight that's scheduled so you can train for that fight, well, guess what? Boxers get fat in between fights. Why does that happen? It happens because there's no reason to train. You can actually turn teaching into training by simply calendaring an event in which young people, or your church in general, Christians in general, need to actually be ready to engage something. When there's something coming they must engage, young Christians and old Christians like me will be far more interested in learning and in actually engaging the topics and in practicing the topics and in thinking through what they're going to say about certain issues or what they actually believe about certain issues. Why? Because now they are looking forward to an event in which they're going to be tested. Training is simply teaching with a goal at the end in which that teaching is actually going to be tested in some way. So you can turn teaching into training by simply calendaring something that causes the shift. Now, given that's the case, we can do an entire show on the training paradigm, which we will do. But what I wanted to do today is simply give you 4 ways that I think you, if you are concerned about this, can strengthen the faith of your kids. And the first one is you've got to become a source for answers. You really can't anymore rely on others to do the heavy lifting for you. And that's always been the case. I've got a lot of books back here on my shelves, right? And I actually have empty out my books about once a year, the shelves, about half of them, to make room for new books. I mean, I only have so much room, right? But you're constantly in training mode, right? Isn't that a great place to be? As parents, there's lots of things we're reading every day. How much of what we're reading is actually going to help our young people defend what they believe? We have to be the source. Again, you cannot point your kids to others. Oh, I got them a great book. All these books are going to sit in their backpack or sit on their shelves. No one's ever going to open those books. You're going to have to be able to take the moments you have with your young people to impart information on a trip, on a vacation, a dinner, while you're doing a project together, whatever it is. Those are the moments, the teachable moments you're going to have to use. But if you're not equipped, you're not going to be able to equip your students. The first thing you got to do is you've got to become a source for answers. Also, you got to have opportunities to talk about the issues, the big issues, the stuff that is really dividing the church and dividing the culture. If the issue is same-sex marriage or it's some other hot topic issue, believe it or not, most of what's going to divide our young people from the church is not going to end up being lack of theological knowledge. It's probably going to be some cultural hot topic that is going to be the wedge issue that will actually cripple the influence of the church in the culture. So we have to be ready to at least explain why it is we believe this is so, why it is we believe what we believe, so that we can actually help our young people hold on to the truth claims that they embrace. So it's going to be important for us, I think, to be able to talk about these issues. Don't be afraid to talk about the issues. Of course, most of the time, the reason why we as parents are afraid is because we don't really have good answers. We're not equipped. We feel like we're as stupid as the person asking us the question. That's the problem, isn't it? So here's what I want to suggest. I think if you take care of the first issue, training yourself to have the answers, you'll see the second issue, a fear of even engaging the topic with your students, or your kids, will actually vanish. Because what's stopping you most of the time is you don't know the answer. Get the answer. Start talking to your kids. Third thing, I think you got to find relevant mentors. I mean, that's really going to be important. And I often said this as I was a youth pastor. I knew I had PKs, right? I got pastors' kids. And I also knew, PKs don't have a good record, right? I mean, for the most part, most of the pastors' kids are a pain in the rear. And I didn't want my kids to become a pain in the rear. And I knew that a lot of it, sitting at my side, listening to what I'm saying is not necessarily going to provide them with the kind of knowledge or the kind of engagement of the issues that I'm looking for. So what I did was I actually, as a youth pastor, I knew I was an old guy. I had gray hair, and I was a lot older than most youth pastors who were doing the work in my area. So I hired 2 20-ish students who were interns, one guy, one girl. And these guys and girls became the leaders in our youth group in one way or another. They led Bible studies. They engaged on camps. They did a lot of stuff with our students that I just wasn't doing. If we were going to go wakeboarding, trust me, it wasn't going to be me on a wakeboard. My intern was going to be doing the wakeboarding. So that's the kind of stuff that they would do with us, right? But what I thought was great about it is that then my young men, my boys, ended up having a mentor in their lives much closer to their age. And this young, hipper, cooler mentor ends up holding all of my values, my Christian worldview. What was great about it is that I found a mentor who was just a younger, cooler version of me and would speak what I want my kids to know into their lives in my stead. Look and find relevant mentors. Fourth thing, after you become the source for answers, engage your kids in these topics, find the relevant mentors. I think it's important to have transformational experiences. And for us, that was often missions trips to Berkeley, to Utah, places where we really spent the time and engaging our young people and showing them and helping them to understand what they believe, and had transformational experiences. And one of those could be something, if you don't think, well, our church doesn't do these kinds of things, our church doesn't do those kinds of trips. Well, this is what great programs like Summit Worldview Conference, where I teach every summer, this is a great opportunity for you to send. There's got to be something like that, some kind of a worldview conference. Start Googling this, and no matter where you are in the country, there's a place you could send your young Christian students to have this kind of transformational experience. My daughter always wanted to go. She went this summer for 2 weeks, and she had an experience I know she will remember for the rest of her life. And those are the kinds of turning point experiences, those things you'll look back at and say, wow, I remember when I was in high school, I had this happen to me, X, whatever it is. And I'll tell you what, if from that point on I felt like I was firm, we all look back at some moment, some aha moment. If it's a conversation, if it's a camp, if it's a conference, we look back at those moments and we go, wow, those made a difference in our lives. 4 things: become a source for answers. Start having conversations. Find a mentor who's relevant, and provide a transformational experience for your students. If you can do that, I think you'll have a much better chance at holding on to the values that you've been teaching them and holding on to the truth, especially when they're challenged in the college years. Boy, can you tell? It's summer now, okay? So I'm actually doing this at night, and it's still way too hot. I'm like under these lights, and I feel like I'm melting. So this is probably a good time for us to say goodbye for this week. But remember, you can find all of our resources, everything we've talked about, in the youth section on the writings tab at coldcasechristianity.com. Just tab on down. You'll see all of our writings related to young people, and they're all downloadable and printable as PDF files. You can collect them and save them. Look at those resources later. So I hope they'll help you as you kind of sort through all of this. And of course, everything's also available on our phone app, where you can look at all the resources that coldcasechristianity.com offers right in the palm of your hand. Okay, till next week, have a great week. Get out there, prepare your young people to hold on to what they believe. And I'll see you right back here next week at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity. A homicide detective investigates the claims of the Gospels. It's available wherever books are sold.